What's up, everybody? Derek here. Today's video, we're going to talk a little bit about PII. We're going to define what PII is. We're going to talk about some types of PII. We're going to talk about some governance and risk around PII. And then lastly, we'll talk a little bit about how you can protect your PII data out there. NIST defines PII as any information maintained about an individual that can be used to distinguish or trace an individual's identity, such as a name, a social security number, biometric data, and any information that's linked to an individual. Medical information, financial, employer records, things like that, which we'll dive into here in a little bit more. Let's talk a little bit more about what actually constitutes and makes up types of PII data. It's a pretty big list, not all of these are exhaustive here, but here are some of the more common ones that we see out there, right? Your name, your full name out there, your home address, where you live, your email address can technically kind of be identified as PII, especially if you don't use a pseudonym or anonymous type email. You're using your full name, social security number, your passport number, your driver's license number, credit card information. Now, some of these obviously cross over into healthcare and protected healthcare types of information, but you get the idea, right? Telephone numbers, properties you own, your vehicle VIN numbers, and obviously things like biometric data, full face pictures, and even getting into, say, cookies, IP info, and other unique identifiers for, say, like your phone, your MAC address. All of those things can be used to, link to essentially kind of track down who you are, where you've been, things like that. So that's just a sampling of some of the types of PII data out there that you're going to run across. Obviously, the most common ones are going to be, social security numbers that we kind of hear about, addresses, passport numbers, healthcare information, biometric data, things like that, which are commonly attacked and gone after in data type breaches that we've seen in the news out there. So let's talk a little bit about compliance. There's no single U.S. law out there that really governs PII. There's multiple governances and compliances and regulations that all kind of constitute and take into account part of PII, but there's no single ruling body for everything. We have things like the U.S. Privacy Act, which kind of governs, how to collect the information, how to, destroy the information, how to maintain and use it. The Children's Online Privacy Act, COPPA, for protecting children under the age of 13, how their information is collected. That's why you might see things on the websites like, hey, are you a minor? Is this for under 13? Video games, things like that, all kind of come into it. Then you have other situations where in certain other countries, like over in the EU, the GDPR, talks a lot about, PII, how do you track cookies, how they protect the information, things like that, right? So again, multiple kind of bodies. And then over here in the US, especially in California, you have the CCPA, which is kind of becoming a more de facto, so I wouldn't be surprised if you see more regulations kind of come out that are kind of mimicking the CCPA. Obviously we have things like HIPAA, PCI, etc., right? So there's no real single governing body. It's multiple kind of bodies working together to kind of constitute PII data. Another interesting thing is, in a recent survey done from IBM, I think it was last year, about 44% of all data leaks and breaches were going after PII data. The average cost of a record or so is around $180, give or take, per PII record leaked. So you can definitely understand that there's monetary fines involved when this data gets out there. That's why it's still so valuable, right? It can be used to build engineering campaigns, meaning social engineering. It can be used for identity theft. It can be used for other types of attacks that we're seeing more in the news, such as more extreme cases like swatting. So let's talk a little bit about actually protecting PII data out there, right? First and foremost, you really want to identify and classify your PII data that you collect. Now, obviously, I'm kind of talking about this as if you're a customer collecting someone's PII data. Really having a data classification policy in place audit trails, acceptable use policies, procedures, things like that are going to be critical in maintaining a consumer's PII data out there, right? So again, classification, knowing where it's stored, understanding how to handle it is all very important. You definitely want to use data security tools, right, such as data loss prevention, cookie consent tools. We're seeing a wide, range now, I think, of new websites coming out that kind of get the annoying, hey, accept all cookies, reject all cookies. So making sure you understand the laws and regulations that you're governed by is very important when collecting consumer data, because again, even things like MAC addresses, cookies, IP info can kind of be classified and linked together as part of a PII trail. Another one that should be kind of standard out there is really using encryption for the data. Knowing where it lives is important, but then once you know where it lives, actually encrypting that data, making sure that the databases are secure. So if something does happen and data does get out, it's essentially encrypted, it's protected as much as possible. Using things like MFA to access that data, understanding who has access to it, multi-factor authentication. I did a prior video to that, so be sure to check that one out to understand how MFA really works. But MFA is really kind of becoming table stakes now for accessing any type of data, accessing any type of systems, things like that. And then lastly, I'll kind of repeat it because I think it's so important, is really knowing where all this data is stored, right? A lot of times people will kind of start storing the data on various systems, various servers, databases, different clouds, and then before you know it, you have like massive data sprawl. The data is all spread out, you have know where it is, and it's very hard to protect it if you don't know where it is. So really understanding that, where it lives, keeping it as controlled and concise as possible is very key. So with that, that's our quick little video on PII. Hope you guys enjoyed. Be sure to like and subscribe, and talk to you soon. Thanks. Take care.